Today we are interviewing Susan J. Lewis, who is the Associate Director for Public Services at American University's Washington College of Law, Hentz Law Library in Washington, D.C. For the record, Susan and I worked together at this library for about 4 years prior to my retirement as the director. Susan, I believe those watching or reading this interview would like to know a little more about you personally. For example, could you begin by telling us about where you were raised and about your family and life both when you were young and today? Then perhaps could you tell us about your education, including where you went to college and then to law and library schools?
Well, I was raised in an academic family. My dad was a political science professor, and so when I was young, we moved around a fair amount as he visited different universities and before he was tenured. I spent the first 10 years of my life in South Dakota. He taught at the University of South Dakota, and we lived in Vermillion, South Dakota. And in between, we lived in Boulder, in Philadelphia, and then finally we settled in Toledo, Ohio, where he taught for the rest of his career at the University of Toledo. So I learned to move around, and I became good at that, and that I found helped me later in my career as an academic law librarian as well. My family was a political family. My dad was active in the ACLU, and so they had us involved in political activity, campaigning, from a relatively early age as well. I went to UCLA for my undergraduate education. I majored in political science. I went to, well, and after I finished college, I did political work for a few years. I lived in San Francisco and worked for Mayor George Moscone, and after that for Mayor Dianne Feinstein, and was there for a lot of the tumult that happened at that time. I then went back to Los Angeles to law school at Southwestern University, and after law school I practiced labor and employment law for about 3 years, and decided that really wasn't what I enjoyed doing. It was interesting, but I think I really enjoyed the research more than the actual practice of law. And so I happened to be practicing in Seattle and was fortunate to discover that the University of Washington had the premier law librarianship program, and to my delight I discovered that one needed a law degree to enter the law librarianship program. I went to talk to Penny Hazelton, who encouraged me to apply, and I went to the University of Washington then and got a library degree. And I've never looked back.
Well, that sounds like sort of an interesting story. You probably have already answered this, but was anyone else besides Professor Hazelton at the University of Washington who played a key role in sort of encouraging you to become a law librarian, or did you just sort of come in pretty much the way you just described?
Well, I actually didn't know a whole lot about law librarianship as I was practicing law. In law school, I spent most of my time studying at home, and it was only later that I got to know the librarians at Southwestern University. But I became interested in and learned more about law librarianship as I was practicing law and started to meet librarians. I got to know some of the librarians at Bogle and Gates in Seattle. Bridget Dakers was somebody, and she's still practicing. She's a private law librarian in Seattle, And she was someone who influenced me to think about law librarianship at the time. She may not realize this, and then I started looking around and realized that the University of Washington had the perfect program for me. And it was a wonderful experience. I loved law school. Law school was so fascinating. Library school was very different, and it too was very enjoyable. I think I finally learned legal research in library school.
Mm.
I think most of us would probably agree that our legal research classes in law school weren't particularly rigorous or memorable. And so for me, it was in library school. I took a beginning legal research and an advanced legal research class from Penny Hazelton. And it was very rigorous, I thought, and very real world. And I think I finally learned proper technique for doing legal research. And it was a lot of fun besides.
Well, that sounds all very fascinating and interesting. Susan, I remember that actually I first met you, I guess about 14 years or so back, when both of us happened to be working here in the Washington, D.C. area. You were, as I recall, in a temporary law reference librarian position at Georgetown. Then in 1999, you joined our law school faculty here at American, where you have been since. I do clearly recall, and I don't know if I should even fess up to this or tell you to your face, that how actually pleased we were to get you. We had been very nervous that you would have taken some other offer, and we were delighted to have you join our faculty. You brought a lot of strength to it. You've done other things. Could you share a little perhaps about some of the various professional positions you've held and the experiences that you've had, both perhaps here as a member of the faculty of the law library or perhaps earlier jobs?
Well, I've very much enjoyed working here at American University at the Pence Law Library. And thank you for your kind words. I was thrilled to come. Over the years, I've done a lot of teaching here, and I think that's the highlight of law librarianship for me, is being able to teach and engage with students. It's still a lot of fun. We teach, we do different kinds of teaching. We teach with the first year what they call legal rhetoric program here. We do that with the legal rhetoric faculty. And then we do our own teaching, various kinds of work with the journals and the clinics here. We each have our own niches here and our own constituencies and groups that we work with. I still love doing reference work. There's always something different and new to being at the reference desk, and so that's still a lot of fun. I enjoy that very much, and I enjoy my colleagues. I think I work with an incredibly interesting and great group of people. I admire all of them, and they've become my friends. Before I was here at American University, as you mentioned, I worked briefly at Georgetown. We had moved to the Washington area, and I knew Bob Oakley from work I had done on the Government Relations Committee years before, and I had worked closely with Bob on that, and he had a vacancy, a sudden vacancy, and it was in the foreign and international position, and I had never done foreign and international work before, and I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a try. And it was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. It was new. It allowed me to stretch a little bit and try something new. I don't know how good I was, but I was the only person there for a while, and I did that for about 4 months, and then got an offer from you all at American University and came over here. So Georgetown was an interesting experience for me, different. Before Georgetown, I had been at Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. I spent 4.5 to 5 very happy years there. I went to Willamette. I had been at larger libraries before that. I had been at Yale and Northwestern prior to that, and I really felt as though I wanted to try a smaller library. I thought perhaps that would be less departmental and compartmentalized. And it did give me an opportunity to try a lot of different sorts of things. I did an awful lot of reference. When you're at a small library, everybody does a little bit of everything. So I did a lot of reference work, a lot of teaching. I taught advanced legal research there. And I enjoyed that very much. The librarians at the main campus library were pretty closely involved with the law library, and that was a nice experience as well. Sometimes law libraries are kind of remote from the library on the main campus, and it was a nice experience to get to know them so well and work with them. Prior to that, I was at Northwestern University. I was there for a couple of years. I was the evening and weekend librarian. Again, we had moved there from another city, and so that was an interesting experience. I worked closely with Chris Simone, who was the Associate Director for Public Services there at the time, and George Grossman was the director. And that was interesting because as the evening and weekend librarian, I had to do a little bit of everything too. And it was a large collection. So again, I learned a lot. I did a little bit of foreign and international, and you know, lots of different kinds of things. We taught there as well. We did the Lexis and Westlaw instruction there, and that was actually a lot of fun. I kind of enjoyed that, the Lexis and Westlaw instruction. I know we don't do that much anymore, but I did enjoy that. And then my first position as a librarian was at Yale University. Morris Cohen was the director, and I was very honored to have been hired and to have worked with Morris. He was the nicest man in the world, a good mentor, and he taught an advanced legal research class, and each of his public services librarians would teach portions of that class, and that was my first real teaching opportunity. Yale was an interesting place. The students, of course, were very bright, very challenging and interesting to work with. They did not have a research class for the first year students in the curriculum, and so the students learned research kind of at catch as catch can, at least at the time. They had a voluntary optional research program taught by the upper level students. And so we had students who were fairly dependent on the reference librarians at the time. So that was a lot of fun to work with them and realize that they were so smart, but they did need a lot of basic help in research at the same time. So Yale was a great learning experience for me, a good place to start out. And so that's, in a nutshell, my professional career.
Well, one thing that I've noted in your background is that you earned your library degree at the University of Washington in Seattle, where you had the opportunity to study under what is probably one of today's greatest teachers of law librarians and mentors, Professor Penny Hazelton. Do you have any experiences or comments about her that you would like to make at this time?
Penny is an exceptional teacher, mentor, and person. Her classes were rigorous. She expected a lot of us. She was a wonderful teacher. I learned so much about librarianship from her, and I have over the years as well. She stays in touch with all of us, and shepherds us along in our careers. But I very much enjoyed the 12 months that I spent in that program. She expected a lot of us, and I think made it a challenging program. She also educated us in the professional world of law librarianship. She expected us to join AALL. We were required to go to the annual conference and to attend Connell, which in itself was just a great experience. It was the first chance to really get to meet other new librarians in the same circumstance. So she took us to the conference and introduced us around, and then we were also expected to do an internship as part of the program at another library. And it was a brief internship. It was a 3-week-long internship, heavily overseen by Penny. And so she would make arrangements with the directors of the libraries that we selected, and would require them or ask them to develop a course for us, a program, a learning program that would allow us to rotate through the various departments in the library to produce materials, to participate in the life of the library. And so I opted to do my internship at the University of Toledo, where my father was still teaching, and he knew the director of the law library at the time, Professor Janet Wallen, and I had a wonderful time there. I developed warm relationships with the librarians to this day. I'm friendly with many of them, and it was a good learning experience, the first chance to really work in a professional capacity at a law library. And so each department had me doing a different kind of a project, and it was a good experience.
Well, that sounds good, and it's everything I've heard about Penny Hazelton and the current program. This sounds very much what I've heard. She must have been busy this past year. I believe there were about 14 students in the program, which I think is the largest group, or nearly the largest group that they've ever had in the program, going back to its inception back in the 1940s. Susan, you have actually apparently listened carefully in class and continued your involvement in various professional activities outside of your own library, because in the recent years you have been not only a leader in law librarianship, but specifically you have been serving as the treasurer of the American Association of Law Libraries. You've also been elected to leadership roles in at least 2 of AALL's chapters, the Western Pacific chapter, and now, more recently, the Law Librarians Society of Washington, D.C. Could you tell us a little bit about some of your leadership activities, actually not just outside of the institution, but perhaps here on the campus as well, but maybe outside of the law library, if you've had any experiences, contributed to the general community of the university as well as the profession?
Well, right now I'm on the law school technology committee. I'm new to that committee. I'm just getting my feet wet now. But it's a nice opportunity to work with law faculty. The librarians here at American University have faculty status, all of us. We do have a separate law library faculty, but we are expected to participate in the life of the law school, and so typically we are active in various law school committees. So I'm enjoying this technology committee. We're now talking about a faculty blog for the law school website, and as a librarian on the committee, I find that all very interesting, and the faculty are, I think, of mixed feelings about that. So that's been kind of interesting. We're also looking at, the university and the law school are very interested in online instruction and developing. I think finally law faculty are beginning to take that seriously. I think law has been an outlier in online instruction. And I think finally American University and other law schools are beginning to see that this could be a fruitful area for instruction. So we are now looking at ways to get a program like that going. The law school has hired a new fellow who is coming in to be in charge of our online instruction, development of online instruction. So the technology committee will be overseeing some of that and advising on that. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. One of the things I've also enjoyed here at American University is interacting with the main campus Bender Library and the librarians there. They also have faculty status. They're a separate faculty, library faculty than we are. But through my career, I've always enjoyed getting to know the main campus librarians. They're different, but they're the same, and we all have similar interests. And I think that's always been one of the highlights of my life in an academic community. So I've tried to maintain active relationships with those librarians. And so I've been on various committees. I've been on the public interest committee here at the law school. This particular law school is very active in public interest and in funding students' activities, both to study public interest areas of law and also to go out and to subsidize them in their ability to work in public interest organizations. And so there are scholarships here and many kinds of support for students doing that. And so I've been involved with that over the years. So the law school has been an engaging and interesting place to be. I've enjoyed the faculty. Some of the faculty I've been here now, I guess 13 years, and many of the faculty that were here when I arrived are still here. And but we've had an influx of a new generation of faculty, and I'm getting to know them and enjoying them very much.
Well, that is, sounds good, and it sounds like a sort of an interesting experience that you've had here, and that's wonderful. And thank you, Susan Lewis, for allowing us to visit with you today, and for taking these few moments to share so much about yourself and our profession. Before closing, however, is there anything that you would like to add that we have not covered?
Yeah, I would like to add or to talk about how much I've enjoyed being a law librarian. Penny Hazelton once said to us when I was a student that my colleagues are my friends. And I've really found that to be true. Law librarianship is more than just a career. It's a tightly knit group of colleagues and friends, and I look forward every year to going to the annual meeting. I've worked with so many interesting people. These are friends that I look forward to seeing every year. I've also enjoyed my professional activity immensely. This is how I've gotten to know many of these friends over the years, and being treasurer has been fascinating. It's been a real challenge. I've learned so much new. I've also realized through this experience how impressive and supportive our headquarters staff is. Kate Hagan, the executive director, and Paula Davidson, who's our director of finance, have, I think, just done an incredible job for all of us in the association. I don't think most members realize how much work they do for us. They make us look good. And I've learned a lot from them, and I've enjoyed very much working with them and with my colleagues on the executive board. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak today and to talk a little bit about myself.
Well, I would love to take the credit for all this, but I'm having so much fun doing these interviews because I too have friends, including yourself, in the field with whom I'm reconnecting, and it's been a wonderful experience. So I'm very pleased that we could call on you this afternoon, Susan, to talk to us and perhaps give information that will be of use to some of the viewers of this interview. Thank you.
Thank you.